So what is the beef? I realize that's a wrong word, so I should be using conflict or contention between the Modi government and RBI. Why are both of them at each other's throats, so publicly using such vituperative language and tweets? Let's look at this beef. Once again, I shouldn't be using that word, conflict or contention, one slice at a time. Number one, consensus on a dividend policy. Now, perhaps the RBI should not have surprised the Modi government by slashing the dividend from the budgeted 66,000 crore rupees to 30,000 crores last year. Now, using this crisis, they should try and kill the dividend stroke surplus friction by agreeing to a smooth dividend policy, and they can easily do that by using RBI's very stout reserves. Contention number two, provisioning on a one-day default. The government and several bankers see this requirement as unusually strict and impractical. But you know what, for a system which has been so lax and prone to evergreening abuse for decades, perhaps the RBI was justified in using a shock-and-awe tactic to force compliance. Also, the government's entreaty to exempt power companies from these provisions is frankly a bit contrived and lazy. Reforming the power sector is the government's problem, not RBI's. Number three, regulation of public sector banks. Here too, the RBI has got a strong case. Most of the rot is in public sector banks, and which are controlled by the government. With some token presence of RBI nominees on a few committees and boards. Now, recall how Prime Minister Modi was so vocal about phone calls from UPA ministers that had destroyed public sector banks. Then why is his government preserving such a pernicious structure? Why is Prime Minister Modi not giving RBI unambiguous control of public sector banks in much the same way that private banks have been put under the regulator? Contention number four, prompt corrective action or PCA. Now, this is similar to the stress tests that American and European regulators performed on systemically important financial institutions after the 2008 debacle. Under PCA, nearly half the PSBs, about 11 of them, and one private bank have been restrained from giving new loans until their balance sheets are repaired. Now, this has quarantined almost a fifth of all bank advances. The government believes this has severely restricted the flow of productive credit and hit growth. But here again, the RBI is on the point. It cannot allow the financial sector to get dislocated by potentially rogue loans from fragile lenders. If anything, the responsibility of recapitalizing weak banks has to devolve on the principal shareholder and controller, which, you guessed right, is the government. Number five, the conflict around a payments regulator. Now, the government wants to create a separate regulator for payments and settlement systems. Quite correctly, the RBI is objecting vehemently to an unconscionable trimming of what it sees as its remit, its turf. There are several other pinpricks, but all the major flashpoints I have just listed. On 4 out of 5, as you will see, 4 out of 5, the RBI's case is stronger. But I can now detect a furtive sixth point, which could end up being actually the most diabolic. This one is getting inserted into the RBI government standoff. Let me quote S. Gurumurthy, the powerful RSS ideologue who has very recently been controversially para-dropped into RBI's board. And of course, ever since he's come on board there, he's stirred things up. Now, he says, the RBI Act itself says the management of RBI is entrusted to the board, with the governor and the deputies being mandated to exercise management powers subject to the board's directions. I hope I'm wrong, but I see a fairly sinister attempt at what I can only call a power creep here, to enhance the scope of RBI's board from management / administration to overseeing policy, to somehow reduce the governor to just another member of the RBI board, a bit like the position of a managing director on the board of a public company. This is blasphemous. It must be fought tooth and nail. The RBI board is not a policy-making or a policy-approving entity, which is the responsibility of the governor and the Monetary Policy Committee or MPC. So, dear Governor Patel, please stand firm. Do engage with the government, of course engage with the government, and accommodate all sensible inputs. That's part of your job. But don't give in on other points or quit. This, sir, is a moment of institutional truth, of institutional sanctity. Therefore, Governor Patel, you simply have to hold your ground.